I'm making the introduction. Lapo, I think you know Dr. K. Riegle van West. Some of us are familiar. She's been doing research in the field of Poi therapy, Poi interventions. I know she focuses a lot, has a lot of experience working with older populations, but the idea itself is the same, the idea that we have, which is to enhance the accessibility of Poi for everyone and to develop it as more of an interventional tool, right? As a platform. So she's got a lot of trainings. She's an old friend of me and the project. We collaborate and share a lot of ideas. And I'm really happy for her to be here today to share her project with you. Also, selfishly, on a personal note, I really want to see this person travel around Europe and meet all of you, because I think that she could provide a similar sort of like stimulation to the movement that I did. So I hope you guys can get to know her and think about future projects. Cheers. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you for having me, Craig, and all technical assistants, everyone organizing the conference is really great. So yeah, as Craig mentioned, I'm going to be just sharing a little bit about Poi as a therapeutic tool, some of the research and clinical applications, but I thought I would first start by just sharing a little bit about how I got into the work and a little bit of my background. So I'm not sure where a lot of you are coming from, but for me, I came from the circus world. I grew up doing youth circus in America. I loved it. It consumed me. I loved how it was playful. It wasn't competitive. I could just be myself, be, you know, whoever I wanted to be in the circus. And I continued doing circus arts long after that youth circus arts program. And it was there that I was introduced to Poi eventually, not until I was maybe, I don't know, 20 or something. And I just liked the way it felt. I didn't really know much about it. I just picked it up, spun the one Poi in a circle, and there was something really engaging and meditative about it. So I stuck with that, stuck with my own practice and started teaching people. I had a little center in Chicago where I was teaching flow arts and making props. And eventually this led into my academic work. So I was doing my MFA at the time, my Master of Fine Arts. And for my final thesis, I decided to combine my love of Poi and flow arts into my academic work. And so I embedded accelerometers and gyroscopes inside of a pair of Poi, and it sent data to a computer about where the Poi were in their orbit and how fast they were going, and essentially created a kind of gestural musical controller, musical instrument, I guess you could say, because I was also a musician. And so I was really interested about, you know, that's something that I like about Poi is that it's rhythmic. So I was kind of interested in this intersection of music and movement and flow arts. So yeah, I made that thing, the Orbitar, ended up working on that project for a while, giving a TED talk about it. And at some stage I pulled back and I was like, wow, I've been working with Poi for, I don't know, at that time it was already 5, 6, 7 years. And I just started to wonder why I loved it so much. And I always came back to that feeling that I had from the very first time that I spun it around. It just felt really good. But then I started to wonder why it felt really good. And I had heard a lot of stories from people. A lot of the people that I was teaching had told me why it felt good to them, but I was thinking more objectively, like what actually is going on with the brain and the body when you're like making this thing orbit around you. And I realized there was no clinical research. So I got in touch with the University of Auckland. First of all, if anyone is writing anything in the chat, I cannot see it. Let me put up the chat. Okay, I now have up the chat. So I traveled to New Zealand. Yeah, I was living in America at the time. And I got in touch with the University of Auckland because Poi, we think, although we don't exactly know how Poi might have migrated, but the earliest records of Poi are with the Maori people of New Zealand, the indigenous people. There's no written record of how it might have gone from New Zealand to anywhere else, but the word Poi is a Maori word. We assume it all evolved from the traditional Maori Poi. And I thought to do this kind of clinical research, I felt it was important to incorporate Mataranga Maori knowledge and the sort of the whakapapa, the history of the Poi into my thesis. So yes, I traveled to New Zealand. I did a clinical trial on the effects of Poi on physical and cognitive function for older adults. These were community dwelling older adults. And I don't know if you saw Jamie's presentation, But if you did, he's over there in the corner doing range of motion testing. He happened to be in New Zealand during this clinical trial, so that's how we know each other. He was collecting data. So my participants did a whole bunch of physical, cognitive, and emotional tests. The ones that you see here are, upper limb range of motion. The one with the pegs is manual dexterity. Lower body strength is this guy. He's going to be sitting and standing for that chair. And bimanual coordination is this circle drawing task. Those are just some of the tests. And after a series of tests, my participants practiced Poi twice a week for a month. There's also a control group, an active control group doing Tai Chi. And we did two baseline measurements. If anyone wants to know more about the study design, I'm happy to talk about that, but I feel the details are a little bit boring. So essentially, they did some tests, they practiced Poi and Tai Chi, and then they did some tests again, more or less. And the statistically significant results that came out of that study were improvements for the Poi group in grip strength, in balance. So again, these were healthy older adults. So they were all standing up, shifting weight, crossing the midline. And in terms of cognitive change, they also improved sustained attention. So the ability to sustain your focus or attention over time. And it was pretty exciting to see a cognitive change, especially with such a short intervention period, which is a month-long intervention. So that was exciting, not unexpected, but exciting. I was also asking my participants how they felt along with this quantitative data. I think it's important to paint a full picture and ask people how they're actually feeling. So these next results are the top things that people said in these questionnaires. So they were having fun. I don't probably need to go on about the importance of play and fun in terms of therapeutic tools. Extremely important. If something's fun, then you want to do the thing, and that's exactly what we want. And of course, play has profound benefits for sculpting the brain and all kinds of things. So that's great. People find Poi fun. Challenging. My participants really enjoy the challenge of learning a new skill. For older adults especially, this is quite cool. I do think that has a lot to do with us as facilitators, finding that right level of challenge for each of your participants, which a lot of these circus arts are really good for, because the learning curve and the variations, when you're working with a student, that you can make it easier or harder. So they enjoyed that challenge. And they also found it relaxing, which I, again, think has to do with how you facilitate a Poi session. So you could facilitate something that's very high energy, like when I'm working in a preschool, or you could make it very relaxing, but that's what they reported. And I also asked them after every lesson to write down the top 3 words to describe how they were feeling. And this just shows the Poi group and the Tai Chi group, actually. And it's pretty obvious which one is which. The Tai Chi group was kind of unanimously calm, relaxed. So the bigger the word, it means that it was said more times. So the Tai Chi group, we have calm, relaxed, and peaceful coming out like really clearly. And the Poi group's a little bit more of a jumble, which is just, I'm not saying one of these activities is better than the other, just interesting to see the differences. And what's also interesting is that on those longer form questionnaires that I gave out, there was an area to write about positive things you were feeling and also negative things. And a lot of these words, which have quite a negative connotation, like tired or frustrated or uncoordinated, nobody was writing about those under the negative. They were writing about them under the positive, saying like, oh, I felt really frustrated and uncoordinated, but then I made progress with this move and that felt great. So it's kind of interesting. In terms of what they were feeling when they wrote these 3 words for this exercise, I don't know, but in the longer form questions, a lot of these words were incorporated into positive answers. So now after that study, I'm clicking. Can I talk and click? After that study, I decided to go out into the real world, because being in academia was great, but I wanted to understand, can you see this video? Can someone nod? Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to understand how this might apply in real life. So I went to a bunch of senior living facilities here in New Zealand, working again across all levels of care. So from independently living to rest home, hospital, dementia, and asking the people living there, clicking and talking, what they would need to work with Poi, what they would like to see, and also asking the staff. So to see how, you know, this PhD research might have application in the real world. And I was also doing some research, not as rigorous as my PhD, but I was still asking questions. So some of the things that I asked was, you know, how much did you enjoy the session, and would you like to do Poi again? Simple questions, but very telling of how successful an intervention might be in the future. Again, because if people want to do the thing, it will probably be successful. And I will say on this one, how much did you enjoy the session? There was an option to say that I didn't enjoy it at all. It's just that nobody said that, just amazingly. There were some people that looked quite grumpy during the sessions, but you know, they must have gotten into it in the end. So that's great. And this one's a little bit annoying to read, but this one was specifically with independently living older adults. This is from a questionnaire that already exists, so that's good. It's a valid, reliable questionnaire, and it measures satisfaction across those domains you see at the bottom: physical, cognitive, social, emotional, and safety, and how satisfied people feel in each of those things. So pretty high levels of satisfaction. This was asked, yeah, directly after doing the Poi sessions. And I also went into 2 hospitals here in New Zealand. So I was working with the physiotherapists on the adult neuro rehab wards, training them and working with Poi as a therapeutic tool. So this was mainly people recovering from various neurological conditions, but there was also other people there, like amputees, for example. And they were implementing Poi in group rehab exercise classes on these wards. So similar questions and actually similar responses from the patients in terms of if they enjoyed it, do they want to do it again? Do they think it would be helpful? Quite similar to the senior living facility, very high numbers. And I asked the same questions to the staff. So this is the staff now. And this is a very small number, by the way. This was 8 people for the staff. The other numbers were a bit bigger. But they were keen to use a New Zealand word. They were keen. And in Middlemore Hospital, I have one of my certified instructors working there. And she's been running a program, again, on an adult neuro rehab ward for probably 2 years now. And that quote there just kind of testifies to how popular it is and the impact that it's had. She said sometimes it's so popular they actually have to turn people away because they don't have enough room. And I think now there's another ward that started the program. So all of this was just a testament to that kind of clinical research being put into action, and that indeed it can work in these clinical settings. And the last one of those that I want to share is just a little bit about Poi and Parkinson's. I did a kind of another self-reporting qualitative study with these 4 organizations. And I'm just going to share a video of what it looked like, because Poi with Parkinson's looks quite different than what you saw with the seniors. So with Parkinson's, the Poi is quite useful in terms of coordinating gross movements. So you'll see a lot of stuff with gait, with walking, with jumping, and just with coordinating that rhythmic movement. This is one of the organizations in the US. And then what you'll see after this is actually some interesting stuff with the trembling and the shaking, which is one of the major symptoms of Parkinson's. There's been a lot of research, on things like riding a bike and Parkinson's. For some reason, I was never able to get that video to play in my PowerPoint all the way. So that's where it stops. And I have some data on that, actually, on trembling and shaking. So again, I was asking similar questions with similar results of the people that participated in this study. Do you think it could be helpful for improving your quality of life? Do you want to do it again? Resounding yes. And also in terms of the symptoms. So this data here just comes from one group of participants. They were in a geriatric hospital in Germany. One of my certified instructors there was administering this, and she's a Poi spinner. So she was worked at the hospital. So she was doing the lessons and administering the survey. So what this is a graph of is just self-reporting. She taught 3 Poi lessons, and after every lesson, they just reported if their symptoms felt better or worse. So the symptoms you can see on the side there. Again, this is, just their own feelings, but it appears the more that they did Poi after the second lesson, after the 3rd lesson, they reported their symptoms feeling better and better, like they're feeling less trembling, feeling improvement in mood. So I don't know if it's every single line on there is trending up. except for maybe when it's shaking, trembling, it's looking like it's plateauing, but interesting nonetheless. I think Poi and Parkinson's is actually a really good match, because the external, the physical object of the Poi and that kind of external stimuli is something that's important with Parkinson's. For example, if you just say like punch into the air versus like punch this thing, it will really change how the person is able to move. So I'm not an expert in Parkinson's, but I've done quite a few workshops and conferences and stuff. I think it's a really good match. If anyone wants to research Poi and Parkinson's, the world is your oyster. Right, so after doing all this work with these kind of specific populations, I started to branch out, doing kind of corporate wellness, doing training sessions, and also working with kids and people of all ages and abilities. And based on all this experience, just creating resources, because my goal was always just to support other people doing this work, because there's only one of me, but there's a whole community out there. So I started making with, PDF guides, and then I branched out into doing stuff for kids, including original music that has like the instructions in the music, spin your Poi high, low, fast, slow, along with videos that go along with that, and also guides about making the Poi, and also learning some of the kupu, the words and the traditions of Maori Poi making, keeping that kind of kaupapa in the practice. And on top of that, the certification program, just because I was getting messages all the time saying, do you know anyone in Idaho who can teach Poi at a senior facility? I was like, gosh, I don't know. So I started this instructor certification program, and there's now a really amazing cohort of people similar to what Craig is doing, but with Poi, all over the world, who are all really passionate practitioners across different fields. And I have a video. Sorry. This is my first time doing this particular kind of screen sharing, so it's like it's throwing me off. I have a video. There it is, of some of these instructors that are on this, that you just saw on that page. So just to show you what they're up to, this is Janine in Australia. She's working, she's the one that just leapt onto the screen, dancing in the corner. She's working in an aged care facility. This is Maria in Switzerland. She's specifically working with people who are rehabbing from surgery. This is Karanjat. She was researching, she's from India, but she was doing research in the US, I think at the University of Southern California, but she brought Poi to her hometown in India and started a program for seniors in the park. This is Daria. She actually works with Jamie. She is in the UK, but she did her practicum in Croatia, where she's from, working in an aged care facility. And this is Hillary in New Zealand. So she has an amazing dance program for 60 plus maybe. And so she's incorporating Poi into her dance class. So that's just whoa, I messed up the screen share again. That's just a little look, at what some of these people are up to. And it's quite an exciting time for Poi and circus arts. People right now are desperate for ways that things that they can do at home, things that are accessible, things that boost your endorphins, that are good for your health. Like the list, goes on and on. This is an interview that I did for BBC World News specifically about Poi. They did this title, Poi therapy for coronavirus, but just about how Poi can help with mental health and stuff. And there's been a lot of attention from a lot of media outlets about what SpinPoi is up to, and all kinds of other facets, like entrepreneurial competitions are recognizing the work, universities are recognizing the work. And it's just an exciting time. This is just my exciting time photo to be in this field, and all of you are pioneers in this field. So that's awesome. Thanks for being here. And that's the end of my presentation. I usually talk really fast. I did that again. I'm not sure how long I was supposed to talk. But if you want to find me, you can ask me questions now, but if you want to find me out in the world in virtual space, here's all the things. You can email me anytime. I'm always really happy to support people in whatever they're doing, even if you just want someone to talk to you about Poi necessarily, but you just want to talk to someone about what you're up to in the world of accessible circus or an idea that you have. I'm always around. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kate Riegle van West. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You were pretty short. Yeah, you had 40 minutes.
Sorry,
No, but
I
it's
don't
okay.
know.
Okay, it's really great because I'm seeing here, like you actually pulled a larger in-person audience than the other groups. So I'm guessing, and I know with your material, it's nice you just put it out there. And this is a group of academic, social people as well. So I think it would be great to have, if they could have a chance to have a conversation with you. I'm sure lots of people have lots of questions about Poi in general and the overlaps. So is it okay with everyone if we turn this into a conversation?
Sounds great.
Dr. Riegle van West.
Yeah, knowing who you all are, I skipped over, it's like you guys are gonna know a lot of this stuff, so I don't need to belabor some of these points like I would with other audiences.
One
Yes,
area I don't think you touched, I'm sorry, I was gonna ask Kate if you didn't really talk, so like what are you doing right now, like in this moment? Did you really come up to speak with that?
Yeah, I'm focused a lot now in kind of training the trainer. So this like certification stuff, there seems to be quite a demand for that. And I'm getting a lot of, so I work more with clinical practitioners and circus people. So a lot of people that are coming to these trainings are physiotherapists and doctors, yoga instructors, or people in other similar disciplines who have maybe never done Poi before, but just like functional juggling and other circus arts, it's so accessible to learn. You don't need to become a master in Poi to be able to work with Poi as a therapeutic tool. So these people can go through the certification without having ever tried Poi before. So I'm focused quite a lot on that. And I'm also working on a physical product that I can't disclose too much about, but it's basically a modular Poi that are quite adaptable, because I think there's a kind of hole in the market there for Poi that actually really work for the kind of clients that I'm working with. And I have a new kids video coming out. It's very cute. I worked with a primary school. So it's a follow along video to an original song that's a bilingual song. So it's in Te Reo Māori, which is the native language here, and English.
Beautiful.
Is Bendigoose there? Because I'm not in person. So can somebody who's in the space moderate the conversation?
Yes,
I can
of
also
course.
see the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of people here in person in Budapest, and also we have a couple of participants in the Zoom. Whoever wants to have a question, here is the time. Mark, maybe you would. Oh yeah, here.
That's not true.
Here we have someone, please.
So my question is, like in the very beginning, like you did your research and then you started to go out into this like elderly homes. How was your experience of you were a doctor, right? I'm asking, I can't see her right now because they're cracked in there, but
Moment, yeah.
But like, how did you like approach the homes of like elderly people, saying like, so I have this like therapy thing, like to maybe frame my question in another way, for like functional juggling, like we're like two circus people in Halle, we could do therapy with this, and we could like teach physicians, and then they ask, so where do you come from? And we're like, yeah, we're like jugglers, right? So how was the experience back then? What did you do? What did you tell them? I mean, research perspective, but just that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a lot of what I was feeling before I did my PhD, is a lot of like, who are you? So that's actually a large thing that led me to do the PhD, because I was trying to go to these facilities before I moved to New Zealand. I was trying to bring Poi to like rehab centers in Chicago. And it was just like, who are you? What is this circus thing? What is this hippie thing? Like, so I realized this PhD was not only going to provide the clinical evidence to kind of substantiate what we already know, but it would give me this arbitrary title, which would suddenly like open these doors for me. And that is kind of what it did. So even when I was in the middle of my PhD, even just mentioning that was like kind of helpful. So annoyingly, that helps. But obviously that's not an option for everybody. So, and any research that you can present is helpful. So even just the preliminary research that I had was helpful, because in those kind of facilities, they care, they need like hard evidence on how this thing is going to improve the quality of life, because then they can report that back ultimately it probably just makes the facilities like more money if they can report on like the quality of life of their residents. Things that improve balance, for example, they can report there's been less falls. So like anything that you have that you can present when you first go to a facility that talks about that kind of stuff is really helpful. And juggling has the most research of any that I've seen of any of the kind of flow arts props, like more than poi or hooping or anything like that. So right, when I went into those facilities, I had some research, I had the PhD, which was helpful, but also I approached it as more of a open experiment. So it wasn't until much later when I had experience under my belt that I could say, I have this program and this is how it's going to work. So on those first ones, it was like, I would like to come for free and try something out. And that's harder to say no to. Of course, you need the time and the capacity to be able to go for free, and that's not sustainable forever, but people will open their doors to you usually if you put it like that, and you make it as easy for them as possible. So it's not going to require any of their staff. It's not, you know, you'll come early, you'll set up the room, like whatever. So I was like bending over backwards to do a lot of that stuff. I worked really hard and was there for a lot of hours. So that opened the doors. And then once I had some of that experience to report on, that helped open more doors, basically. Having an inside connection is like everything. If you know anyone at any place, that can like open the door for you. Another thing that I did was I gave a poi lesson to the staff, because if you can get the staff on board and if they have fun doing the thing, then they're an advocate for it and they'll pass that on to their residents. So I did a lot of free, like, here's a poi well-being session just for the staff at this facility, just to have fun, not to teach, not to learn how to teach it, nothing like that. Just like enjoy this free hour of like relaxing with poi, like just have fun. So I think all those things helped, but a lot of places said no. A lot of things fell through. I still have never landed, like, I kind of had this vision that these large aged care facilities would be implementing poi like from the top down. They'd be like, you know, we have 30 facilities across the US and we want to implement a poi program. Like that has never happened, even though I've like pushed for that quite hard. So there's still like some barriers there, even with everything that I have done. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned the research that you could present.
Sorry, can you speak up, because they can't hear it on the other side, the participants of the Zoom meeting. There was an issue about that.
Like louder. I shall be like louder.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, better now. Okay. My question is, you mentioned the research that you presented and it helped to get into working with them in the first place. So do you have any of these research, especially towards poi, that you can share? So for example, when we trying to start these kind of things, we don't have to start from scratch again, but basically can just say like, okay, here's this research from this woman from America, so she's already seeing these and these things happening. So is it possible to share these?
Absolutely. If you go to spinpoi.com, there is a free PDF guide. You can download it and it has everything there. It looks nice. You can send it to other people. And it has an overview of all the research. So you can send that PDF. And there's also a web page if you want to send people to a website instead of a PDF. And it has everything. And my whole dissertation is online, but nobody wants to read that. So I've summarized it in a way that is better.
I was a bit late to the party, so obviously I missed the part where you already presented.
I don't think I said that. Sorry. Yes, it's out there. And if anyone wants anything like custom made, also feel free to translate it, and if you do want to translate the text, I can put it into the design so it looks nice. But also sometimes I make like custom stuff, like, so if you want, if you have a particular facility or audience in mind and you want like a 1-page thing, I mean, just ask me, I'll just make it for you, or I'll leave you a blank space and you can translate, or
Kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting because we are, for quite a long time, I would try to work with elderly people, and especially with a mix from the functional juggling and others. And I follow your work for a couple of years now. So, and oh, I don't know what I wanted to say. I lost my bucket. Yeah, sorry.
I should say I had another very helpful thing, which has been a real mix of being helpful and a hindrance, but in this instance it was helpful, which is that Poi started here and everybody knows what it is, at least in the traditional sense of Māori Poi. So being in New Zealand is very unique in that I can say to a senior facility that I'm working with Poi and everybody knows what I'm talking about, which is not the case anywhere else. There is a question in the chat, but I'm not sure I understand the question.
No, in the chat, it was just repeating the question because there was a problem with hearing.
Oh,
So it's the same question what you answered.
oh,
yeah,
it's
so-
in a private message. It's only to me. Haha.
Yeah, so yeah.
No, there's
Okay.
another thing. Hold on. There's a message that came to me
Oh,
from Marton Gabor. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate? Oh, can they speak though? Their audio is muted, their video's off.
Hi guys, sorry. Yeah, I just had to figure out how to be able to speak and not disturb the others who are in the room. Sorry. So my question.
I see your whole question now. It's further up in the chat. I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
cool.
Okay.
But I can still explain if you need.
Yes, please.
So yeah, sometimes I work with children who has some kind of challenges like GIA, which is juvenile idiopathic arthritis, which is a problem with their wrists and I don't know, and the elbows. So they are less capable of moving. They are getting tired faster, and yeah, and they are a bit more fragile. And I was just wondering if you have any experiences. I think even if you work with elderly people who has quite similar difficulties, maybe you can share some experiences and how to, I don't know, what was your experience and what was your solution for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna say I haven't worked with juvenile arthritis, but I have worked with many older people who have arthritis and who are quite frail. So I think the prop itself makes a huge difference, the type of Poi that you're working with. I cannot believe it. I could go, I don't have any Poi out. They're in my closet. I could go get them. This is crazy. I usually have them all over.
Please go get them.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, welcome to my closet. Here we go.
Yes, we'll get them.
You can see my lovely bin of Poi and all of my clothes. Okay. So getting hot. This light that I have on me is like, it's very warm. So this is why I need to manufacture these Poi, because I'm tired of carrying around all these Poi. So Māori style Poi are light as a feather traditionally. This is just foam inside of here, nothing else. And if someone is quite frail, the weight of the Poi makes a huge difference because they're gonna get fatigued really easily if the Poi is heavy. The trade-off is if it's not heavy, it's harder to feel the movement because there's no weight here, you know, pulling. It like feels like kind of nothing. So there's kind of a weird trade-off there they have to wear. But so if I'm working with someone that's more frail, I will go for something that's much lighter and softer to hold as well, but also the grip. It depends on what is going on with their grip strength and their ability to grip this thing. So usually like a simple sock is an amazing option because you can tie it off however you want. So if you just have something plain, you can tie a loop, in which case someone could put their whole hand and they don't even need to be holding it. It can just hang out here. You could also tie 2 loops. I'm sure you've seen, this is a terrible one to be working with. You could tie 2 loops, so stick 2 fingers through those loops like this. And then again, you have an open hand position, so you don't need to be holding it at all. Same could work with this kind of ball where you can have like the open grip. So the weight and the grip are like hugely important, but then also the type of movement. So spinning the poi is way harder to sustain than swinging it back and forth, for example. So with some populations, I'm almost primarily working on the horizontal plane and with swinging. So like stirring the pot, like this kind of motion. I've worked with people who can barely lift a finger. They're in reclining hospital beds and they can get this thing, you know, they can get it moving. Just their arm is resting on a chair, but they can get that momentum, especially if you're guiding them a little bit or if you're mirroring them. That's so powerful. So standing across from someone, swinging with them. So I think those are like the 3 factors that I'm paying attention to, is how heavy the poi is, what the grip is like, and then the type of movements and what that would require from them. And I don't make my lessons too long. If somebody is quite frail, I'll keep it very short, maybe 15 minutes. So that too, taking breaks, you know, all that stuff. And there's a lot you can do, like same with a juggling ball. Like there's tons you can do with this that has nothing to do with swinging or spinning, right? You can be squeezing this, you can be holding this, you know, like stretching with this. There's a lot you can do with this object that is pretty simple and a way to take breaks or to make it more adaptable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the actual poi moves at all. I didn't know if anyone would care about that, or like what. I know everyone's probably working with different populations, so I didn't go into that, but I'm happy to if you want.
We have time, so if you would like to show it.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I'm guessing that most people know how to do some poi, like, I don't know, like circus poi, like figure eights and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay. Because I draw on that stuff, like the foundation that's already there in terms of poi. And okay, where to start? So I guess with poi, there's like plane, timing, and direction. Those are the 3 variables, right? So the plane is where the poi is in space. The timing is how the poi are moving in relation to each other, like if they're same or split. And the direction is which way the poi is moving in relation to you. So depending on the plane. So if the poi with like on the plane in front of you, it could be moving to your left or to your right. Or if it was over here, it could be moving what you would perceive as forward or like backwards. So with those like 3 variables, plane, timing, and direction, and then the 2 modes of movement, swinging or spinning, that's the whole foundation for the kind of lexicon of poi as a therapeutic tool, because you can invent infinite exercises just from those variables. And in a therapeutic setting is obviously not about learning cool moves, like that's fun too, but that's like not the purpose of being there. So that's why the facilitators don't need like a high level of expertise. If they can wrap their brain around the kind of theory, then they're like good to go. But some like kind of special moves that I don't know, maybe you may or might not have done that I do all the time would be like, for example, if you're swinging, something like passing hand to hand. This can be done sitting in a chair in like super slow-mo. So if you have someone who's like very frail, you might not even be getting the momentum of the poi going here, but they're still moving from side to side. If you have someone standing, this movement, or they can be doing this with the chair, like with the momentum, they can be doing this with a full arm swing. And then you can incorporate balance either by looking, like turning your head, or even more so by taking a step, for example. So that one kind of pendulum motion, just as a hand-to-hand passing exercise, has so many options. Then you could also pass it, for example, from an arm circle as part of a warm-up. Or so yeah, I kind of build on that framework and the spinning and swinging to like expand that. And Poi also has a lot of like catching and tactile feedback. You know, for example, this is very therapeutic. Anything that's tapping the body, especially if you're working with someone who's had a stroke. Whew, gonna get some more light. And they might have a really weak side. What's nice about Poi is if you're working with one, it's very one hand dominant. So you could do something like have the if this is your weak hand, it could just be resting, and you could just have the tactile feedback. I'm not catching it, I'm just hitting it. I did this a lot in the rehab wards on the hospitals. Just trying to regain some like feeling there. So it's quite good for if you have someone that has a heavily dominant side. Of course, when you're working with two, there's infinitely more options. It's kind of a weird overview, but a lot of my resources go over it like quite in depth. But I think because you're circus people, you'll know what I'm talking about. Hopefully. When I say play timing and direction, you're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, and these ones are also really nice. This is how you would use this Poi traditionally. Is all this tactile stuff. So they're kind of made for that. And they make a nice sound, which the sock Poi don't make. I'm like bright red. I was so nervous that whole time. Are there any other questions?
So do you predominantly work in a swinging style as opposed to a spin? As in like, is that is that sort of a more predominant stuff, or like what inspires you to go to move from the swinging to the spin, or even just to choose a spin first, or whatever it might be? So
yeah, it heavily depends on the population. So like swinging is just so much less taxing and more accessible. So if I'm working with like very physically capable people, I might just do some swinging as a warm-up, and then we're going to be spinning because they can, and because that opens up a whole variety of movements. So it just depends on who it is. Like kids, we're spinning. Kids who are just like physically able, like all they want to do is this. So we're going to incorporate that with other motor skills, for example, like marching or balancing, or and then maybe use the swinging as kind of a self-regulation thing at the end to calm down. So it's I really adjust depending on who I'm working with. That's kind of the beauty of it. And that's the skill in being a facilitator, is you have to know, kind of when to switch into what.
Yep. And like I love the swinging. I think the swinging is excellent. I'm just wondering like what that sort of transition point is, and if there's any sort of like sort of guides that you use to make those transitions. I think and I probably don't, even just hindsight, like I probably don't use enough swinging in some of my training, even for trying to work on more traditional Poi technique. I still think the swinging is so important. There's a lot of to get out of that, particularly when you're breaking down the moves and building up to complex variations. So.
Yeah, so I usually know the time, that my lesson's going to be. So if it's going to be 30 minutes or something, and then I'll know who I'm working with, and then I can break it down like, okay, we'll have relaxing, more, easier stuff for this period of time, and then we maybe have high intensity for whatever, 5 minutes. And then, so I kind of, I just plan it out like that. But when I did my clinical trial, I don't think I did like any swinging. It was like my first time. I came from a circus background. So I was like, here we go. Like, we're going to learn the weave, and we're going to learn like to do this. And, like, that's where I was at, during that trial. So it's like the more that I know, the simpler the moves become in a way. I think
it's the same thing where it becomes more about the relationships and less about the action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These poi look very nice in this light. I've not used these before for presentation. Sorry, I'm just.
Yeah, I agree.
They're so shiny.
I have a question. Are you incorporating in your sessions to making your own prop? So are you making pois, handmade pois with the participants?
Yes, that happens all the time, especially in these senior living facilities, because in hospitals, in places like that, because a big portion of what they do already is craft activities. And that in and of itself is very therapeutic. So that is a portion of it. And what's nice is that, so I have a video about 3 different ways you can make poi. The sock poi is like so easy, right? But there's still also some ownership when you've made something. There's like research on that about how desirable a thing is if you've made the thing. So even if the activity itself is very simple, it's still helpful for someone to have a part in making their own poi because they feel some connection to it. So from the sock poi, which is a very simple activity, to something that looks more like this, and I also have an in-between style that involves some crafting, but not too much. But this is nice because it has so many parts. Somebody can braid this cord. Somebody, can make this tassel. It doesn't have to look like this. Somebody can wrap this fabric or paint this or dye this or color this. So that is, can be a really nice part of it. And as a facilitator, it can save you if you don't have a bunch of poi. You can say, and as part of this, we're going to make them. Can you please bring, X, Y, and Z? So that's helpful. Hygiene is an issue depending on where you're working. So if you're in a senior living facility, for example, either the people need to keep their poi with them, or you need to make something that you can wipe down or wash, which is a challenge. That's part of the reason I'm manufacturing some poi, because that's another, especially with COVID, is a lot of these like this is kind of a no-go in a hospital or aged care facility. It's just really hard to clean. This is yarn, so that can be an issue. They just have to be aware of. But the poi I'm making are fully washable. You can just throw them in a dishwasher or a washing machine. That video is, if you go to spinpoi.com, there's a section at the top. I think it just says how to make poi. It's on there.
Awesome.
I think we're starting to come low on time. We have a little bit of 10 minutes left. If anyone has a question for Dr. Kate Riegle van West, speak now or catch her next time.
Or she's going to bed.
Yeah, it's late. It's late. I have a question. Are you still interested in doing the research? I know like 2 years ago when we started talking about that, like you were still looking for partners in Europe with universities. Are you still going that way? Or are you?
Yeah, I'm interested. It's hard to, I find it hard to find funding. So I'm not actively seeking out research projects at the moment, but
if anyone heard about someone in Europe doing research with poi, they should contact you.
Exactly. Right. Someone posted the link to the poi making website on my website page. Thank you. Yeah, and they am helping. Do you know Fun in Motion Toys? They're a company in the US. They are making props. They make poi, but they also make some other props like the it's this cube, it's not a Rubik's cube. I have one in the living room anyway. Anyway, they're making some props, and I've been consulting with them to help them do some research on their props. So like they're finding them particularly good for autism, for example. So I help them develop like a questionnaire that they can administer in schools. So that's like, sometimes I do like consulting like that. So it's not like a big poi research project, but it's like if someone, because I have the experience of doing that academic clinical research, it's like if someone wants to just collect some data, but they're not sure how, they can get in touch with me and I can help them kind of set something up.
That's a good point. Actually, like that Jamie started doing with me this year, because he does a lot of funding grants for these different things, and he doesn't have the qualification for the quality control of everything. So he puts in these like 400-pound stipends now for like 2 or 3 experts for every project he submits. And then I'm on like a sort of retainer to consult with him in that way. So that's something to put out to the European audience out there. When you guys are applying for funding, people like me and Kate, very happy for you to list us as consultants for your projects. And we can provide you with that sort of like specialized support that you would like have to spend a lot of time to go out and find on your own. So just as, if you're doing it, and Jamie says it enhances his ability to get the funding application when he shows that he's partnering with other specialists. So we're still, I feel like we're still evolving, developing this ecosystem of these specialists within Circus, but Dr. Kate Riegle van West is certainly one of them for us.
Yeah, I mean, even if I do nothing, you know, feel free to put my name, I mean, ask me, but like, feel free to just like put my name on there. Having someone that has doctor in front of their name is helpful, and that's fine. And
that relates back to one of those earlier questions. With there is this reality for circus artists when we go into these spaces, not feeling sort of as appreciated or like given the same sort of benefit of the doubt as another doctor would be. So having those references, like part of the reason, like I make functional juggling and try to create this, you know, movement, and Kate is doing what she's doing, is to give you guys more wind behind your sails, help you get through those doors faster than it took us, you know. Now it's a nice inclusive circus world, but it's been a long journey. So we need more people to help keep pushing those doors, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. I think if there's not any more questions, we can let Dr. Kate go to bed. I think it's 1 a.m. No?
No, it's not that late. It's only 11, but
okay.
You know, I'm old and tired. Thank you.
I'm over in Australia. So
oh, are you?
A little like bad, yeah.
Ah, nice to have someone on this side of the world. Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, Craig, for just putting this, you know, collective. I know you didn't put the conference together necessarily. There's a lot of people that worked on it, but just for
a lot of people working on this.
Being the connecting force, and yeah, thanks everyone for your time and attention.
Actually, I have one more question, if it's possible.
Yeah.
So, if I understood well, you went back to New Zealand because the Poi was originally from there as historically, and that really reminds me how the kendama was reintroduced in Japan, because you know this there is a skill toy called kendama, and it was basically forgotten in Japan. There was an American guy who found it out in a village, and then it reintroduced in Japan. Now Japan is all about kendama. And basically, if I understand well, you did something similar in New Zealand with the Poi. And what was your experience? How people reacted that, hey, here is this tribal forgotten prop, and that's our heritage. What was their basic reaction to that?
This is a huge question, and it's something that I work on and with every day. So Poi is very much still a part of Māori culture. It's not at all a forgotten art here. It's still part of the everyday fabric of life. It's still part of kapahaka performances, which is Māori performing arts. It's still taught in schools. And so Poi is a thriving Indigenous art form here. When I first started my work, I had during my PhD, I had a lot of problems because I was doing this kind of Poi in my clinical trial. And in New Zealand, this is the only kind of Poi that anyone has ever heard of. And if you say Poi, they're going to assume there's a cultural context to what you're talking about. And they're going to assume it's Māori style Poi. And in order to work with that Poi, you have to have a certain background and knowledge and use the Poi in certain ways. For example, you would never, things you would do with this type of Poi as a therapeutic tool would be completely inappropriate in a cultural context. You wouldn't put this Poi under your leg. You wouldn't put this Poi on the ground. You wouldn't put this Poi on a table without a tablecloth, for example. So when I first did my PhD, I was making this distinction that I was teaching international Poi. I also found the terminology problematic because everybody calls it Poi. So when I say Poi, I'm envisioning this and someone else is envisioning this, and we're on 2 different pages and we don't even know it because there's just one word, and that word's Poi. So I had to make some kind of distinction in the vocabulary because I was getting attacked for what I was doing. Hardcore. Say, who are you coming in here to work with our cultural tonga, our treasure, you know, coming in from outside. It was just like, and I was still, you know, finding my way. It wasn't until I'd been here for a few years and garnered some really strong Maori support that I started to become more comfortable being in this in-between space and bringing some of these Maori traditions into the practice that I do. And so something that I work with my facilitators on is this kind of framework. It's to be very clear that we're working with Poi as a therapeutic tool. So it is a different tool that has different rules around what you can do with it. But we acknowledge that this Poi came from, we think, Maori Poi, and to keep some of those traditions alive in our practice. So for example, I teach my instructors to say a karakia, which is a traditional Maori opening prayer, which is essential before you work with Poi, because it blesses, I guess, for lack of a better word, it blesses the space to say that it's okay for you to be doing what you're doing, for example. So there's some traditions that I've now incorporated back in. All that being said, it's a very sensitive space, and I get a lot of pushback here in New Zealand about what I'm doing. I would not get that anywhere else, right? Because Poi has this unique context here. So I get a lot of hate all the time. But I'm willingly in that space. I came here aware that I didn't have to come to New Zealand to do this work, right? I wanted to engage with that space, and I think is important. So that's the position that I'm in. And I have a very, very strong Maori support, Maori advisors that I work closely with on all of my projects, along with the tangata whenua, the people of the land, of course. In any community that I'm going into, I'm working with them. Good question, and I just talked for ages on that.
Yeah, that's
happy to talk about that more later.
Once.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really enlightening to clear this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're so welcome. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Maybe I'll tune in for a little bit while I'm getting ready for bed.